Hello, in this short lecture I will give you a couple of reasons for the non-existence of God. The first reason why God doesn't exist is that God is perfect and He would have never created such an imperfect world. The second reason for the non-existence of God is that God would have never created the human beings that are capable to do sins and crimes and so on. And we should ask the simple question, why God created the human beings from the beginning? If the answer to that question is that He wanted to put them to the test, then it makes no sense, because He could have created the perfect creatures that would have never do any evil or wrong at all, and then He didn't need to put anyone to the test. And we should also remember that God knows what will happen in the future, so He knew that the human beings will do evil and sins and crimes, so why He created them from the beginning? As I have already told you, that He could have created perfect creatures that are not capable to do evil at all. And for that reason, God didn't create the world, and that is to say, God doesn't exist. The third reason for the non-existence of God is that God would have never created such a world where there is so much cruelty, so much violence, so much deaths, and so much murders, so much diseases and wars, and also you have a lot of poverty and hunger and so much natural disasters, such as earthquakes and floods and hurricanes. So God would have never created such a bad world, and therefore God didn't create the world. That is to say, God doesn't exist. The fourth reason for the non-existence of God is that God would have never created such a world where the very existence of the predator is dependent in his ability to kill the prey. God would have never, so the very existence of the lion is dependent in his ability to kill the lamb or the deer or any other animal. So God would have never created such a cruel world where there is so much injustice, and therefore God didn't create the world, and therefore God doesn't exist. The fifth reason for the non-existence of God is that there are three monotheistic religions, and monotheistic is defined as a belief in one God or the oneness of God, and those religions are actually contradict each other in their explanation of how God created the world. And they also don't have the same God. The God of the Christianity is not the same God as the God of the Judaism or the God of the Islam. So because of all those contradictions and the differences between the gods, we could say that they are not true, they are all false, and they are actually the invention of the human beings themselves, and also God was created by the human being. That is to say, God doesn't exist. And the sixth and the last reason for the non-existence of God is actually there is a logic reason for it. We can say that logically the existence of a being that is omnipotent is impossible, or such an entity that is all power cannot actually exist. And I will explain why. Because we can ask the simple question: if God is able to create such a big stone that he himself cannot lift, if the answer to that question is positive, then we can deduce from it that God is not able to lift the stone that he himself created. And therefore, God is not omnipotent. God is not all power. If the answer to that question is negative, then we can simply say that God is not able to create such a big stone that he himself cannot lift. And we can deduce the same question, the same conclusion, that God is not omnipotent, that God is not all power. Anyway, from that example, we can deduce that such a being that is omnipotent logically is impossible to exist, or such an entity that is all power logically cannot exist, and therefore God that is defined as all power is logically cannot exist, and therefore God doesn't exist. So that were all the reasons for the non-existence of God. Okay, thank you very much.